Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we will dissect Brooke Logan's unforgivable sabotage of Katie's fashion event and the utterly bankrupt narrative choice to frame Sheila Carter for a new stalker's crimes. I maintain, with absolute and unshakable certainty, that Brooke Logan is not a romantic heroine. She is a textbook emotional abuser whose continued framing as the moral center of this universe is a grotesque, indefensible lie. We need to stop pretending that her actions are driven by passion, loyalty, or some misguided sense of family protection. The truth is that Brooke operates from a place of pathological narcissism, and the writer's refusal to hold her accountable is not just flawed storytelling, it is fundamentally, morally, and artistically bankrupt. I am baffled by anyone who argues that Brooke's recent actions at the Logan fashion event are anything less than repugnant. The show's treatment of Katie Logan has always been actively regressive, but this latest storyline elevates that mistreatment to a level of psychological cruelty that is difficult to stomach. I stay not because I still love it, but because someone has to bear witness to the wreckage. Someone has to document the exact moment this show abandoned its last shred of psychological realism in favor of pure, insulting laziness. It is undeniable that Katie Logan Spencer has spent her entire life suffocating in the shadow of her older sister. When Katie made the strategic, brilliant decision to use Eric Forrester's unpublished, unseen designs for the highly anticipated Logan fashion event, it was a declaration of independence. It was Katie finally stepping into the light, asserting her position not as an appendage to Brooke, but as a visionary in her own right. Eric's unreleased designs represent a sacred piece of Forrester history, and Katie's initiative to bring them to the runway was a masterstroke of business acumen. But how does Brooke react? Does she support her sister? Does she celebrate this monumental achievement? No. Brooke reacts with a venomous, all-consuming jealousy disguised as righteous indignation. Brooke claims that Katie is exploiting the family legacy, a justification so intellectually dishonest it borders on the absurd. There is no excuse for Brooke's hypocrisy. She has spent decades manipulating the Forrester legacy for her own romantic and financial gain, yet she dares to weaponize the concept of legacy against her own sister. It is a sickening display of projection, and the writers expect us to swallow it as a legitimate character motivation. The sheer mechanics of Brooke's sabotage expose the writer's contempt for the audience's intelligence. We are told that Brooke, acting entirely out of spite, managed to secretly swap out a multi-million-dollar haute couture collection right before the show began. Let us pause and consider the sheer, unadulterated stupidity of this scenario. Where was the security? Where was the non-existent workplace HR that we have come to expect from Forrester Creations? We are supposed to believe that in the chaotic, hyper-monitored environment of a major fashion runway show, Brooke Logan casually wheeled away the genuine Eric Forrester masterpieces and replaced them with ruined, rejected, defective garments without a single stage manager, model, or security guard noticing. It is a glaring testament to the absurd geography of Los Angeles and the magical, shifting reality of this fictional universe. The writers do not care about logistics. They do not care about the reality of the fashion industry they claim to portray. They only care about engineering a cheap, unearned shock value, treating the audience like simpletons who will accept any contrivance as long as it leads to a cat fight. When the runway lights finally illuminated the catwalk, the resulting disaster was not just a professional failure for Katie, it was a public execution orchestrated by her own flesh and blood. As the models strutted out wearing mangled, defective rags instead of Eric's pristine visions, the humiliation etched onto Katie's face was visceral. How many times must we watch the same betrayal before we stop calling it a misunderstanding and start calling it pathology? Brooke did not just ruin a fashion show. She attempted to annihilate Katie's spirit, her credibility, and her future in the industry. To watch Katie stand there, utterly boggled and heartbroken as the industry elite whispered and pointed, was to witness a masterclass in emotional abuse. Brooke stood in the wings, entirely devoid of genuine remorse, high on the intoxicating fumes of her own perceived supremacy. It is a trajectory of cowardice that Brooke has walked for decades, but never has it been this nakedly malicious. The backstage confrontation that followed is the only piece of this agonizing storyline that felt earned, and that is solely because Katie finally did what the audience has been begging someone to do for 30 years. When Katie slapped Brooke, it was not a mere physical altercation. It was the kinetic release of decades of systemic emotional subjugation. That slap echoed with the weight of every time Brooke stole Katie's joy, every time Brooke undermined Katie's worth, and every time Brooke demanded forgiveness without ever offering repentance. I maintain that Katie's subsequent declaration that she is cutting off all sisterly ties permanently is the only sane, logical response to a betrayal of this magnitude. It is intellectually dishonest to claim that family bonds should survive this level of deliberate sabotage. Brooke crossed the Rubicon of cruelty, and Katie's refusal to accept yet another tearful, manipulative apology is a triumph of character growth that the writers accidentally stumbled into. We must also critically examine the role of Bill Spencer in this catastrophic fallout. When Bill stepped forward to shield Katie, threatening to unleash the full, devastating power of his media empire to destroy Brooke's reputation forever, it shifted the paradigm of the entire series. Bill Spencer is not a man who makes empty threats, and his alignment with Katie in this moment is a searing indictment of Brooke's Teflon status. For years, Brooke has evaded the consequences of her actions because the men in her life, Ridge, Eric, even Bill at times, have protected her from the fallout. But now, Bill is weaponizing the very media infrastructure that has so often celebrated the Logans, turning it directly against the Golden Child. This pushes the Logan family into a war that has no path to reconciliation. It is a scorched earth scenario that I welcome with open arms. It is about time Brooke faced an adversary who cannot be manipulated by her tears or her history. Bill's threat to annihilate her public image is the exact consequence her arrogance demands. Yet, while this deeply personal, catastrophic family war rages on one side of town, the writers have decided to insult us with a secondary storyline that is so lazily constructed it feels like a parody of the soap opera genre. I am speaking, of course, of the utterly bankrupt narrative surrounding Deacon Sharp, Taylor Hayes, and the mysterious stalker. We are forced to watch Deacon and Taylor parade their new public romance around Los Angeles, acting like love-struck teenagers while a deeply sinister threat looms over them. The arrival of creepy, macabre gifts at Taylor's home should be a moment of genuine psychological thriller-esque tension. Instead, the writers immediately resort to their most exhausted, pathetic crutch, blaming Sheila Carter. It is a profound creative failure to repeatedly use Sheila Carter as the universal boogeyman for every single crime committed in Los Angeles. When the evidence, fingerprints, and CCTV footage points directly to Sheila, the characters react with a Pavlovian predictability that is excruciating to watch. Steffi Forrester, in a display of repetitive hysteria that has entirely consumed her character, immediately demands the police arrest Sheila. How many times must we endure Steffi screaming about Sheila before the writers realize they have trapped her in a perpetual loop of trauma and paranoia? There is no nuance here. There is only the loudest, most obnoxious reaction possible. The writers treat the audience with such contempt, assuming we will simply nod along as they recycle the exact same plot beats they have used for the last 3 decades. But the true insult lies in the eventual reveal. Finn, suddenly imbued with the deductive reasoning of a seasoned detective, discovers that his mother actually has a perfect, ironclad alibi. This should be a moment of reckoning for the Forresters, a moment where they are forced to confront their own blind prejudices. Instead, the writers pivot to a trope so archaic, so fundamentally ridiculous, that it belongs in a daytime serial from the 1980s. We are expected to believe that an old enemy from Taylor's past has returned, having undergone extensive plastic surgery to acquire a new face, and is now meticulously framing Sheila Carter to exact revenge. This is not storytelling. This is narrative desperation. It is the creative equivalent of throwing paint at a wall and hoping it forms a masterpiece. The reliance on the new face trope is a coward's way out of writing genuine character-driven conflict. Furthermore, the revelation that this new, surgically altered enemy is operating as a second Luna Nozawa is perhaps the most baffling and insulting creative decision in recent memory. What does it even mean to introduce a second Luna Nozawa? Luna was a specific, contained narrative disaster, a character whose sudden pivot into psychopathy was handled with all the grace of a sledgehammer. To now invoke her name as an archetype, a hidden, murderous infiltrator, waiting in the shadows to destroy the Forrester family, is to admit that the writers have completely run out of original psychological profiles. They are now photocopying their own recent flawed homework. They are trying to manufacture a new era of terror by referencing a storyline that barely made sense the first time around. It is an admission of artistic bankruptcy. The juxtaposition of these two storylines, Brooke's grounded, albeit infuriating, corporate sabotage, and the absurd, campy, plastic surgery stalker plot highlights the schizophrenic nature of this show's current era. On one hand, we have a deeply rooted family conflict driven by jealousy and legacy. On the other, we have a cartoonish villain wearing a literal disguise, plotting the downfall of a family that is too busy fighting itself to notice. The writers want us to feel the emotional weight of Katie's heartbreak, but they simultaneously demand that we suspend all disbelief to accept a phantom stalker with a stolen face. It is a jarring, incoherent viewing experience that punishes anyone who tries to engage with the narrative on an intellectual level. Let us return to Brooke, because her actions are the true poison at the heart of this show. The sabotage of the fashion collection is not an isolated incident. It is the culmination of a lifetime of entitlement. Brooke believes that she is the sole arbiter of what the Forrester legacy should be, despite having no legitimate claim to it other than her historical proximity to the men who built it. Katie, who has worked tirelessly, who has suffered quietly, and who has repeatedly sacrificed her own happiness for the sake of her family, finally dared to claim a piece of the spotlight, and Brooke snuffed it out. She did not do it to protect Eric's vision. She did it because she could not stand the thought of Katie succeeding without her permission. It is a sickness. It is a deep, festering insecurity that the show refuses to diagnose, instead framing her as a tragic victim of circumstance whenever she is caught in her own web of deceit. When Katie delivered that slap, she was striking back against an entire narrative structure that has historically privileged Brooke's feelings over everyone else's reality. The severance of their sisterhood must be permanent. If the writers walk this back, if they force Katie to forgive Brooke in 6 months because family is everything, it will be the ultimate betrayal of the audience. We are witnessing the death of a toxic dynamic, and it must be allowed to stay dead. Bill Spencer's involvement guarantees that this war will be fought not just in living rooms, but in the press, in the boardrooms, and in the court of public opinion. Bill recognizes Brooke for exactly what she is, a predator who hides behind a facade of romantic vulnerability. His threat to destroy her is the most heroic thing he has done in years. Meanwhile, Taylor Hayes is left to navigate a nightmare that she does not even understand. The stalker sending her macabre gifts is a ghost from a past the writers are desperately trying to mine for relevance. But why should we care? Why should we invest our emotional energy into a mystery when the mechanics of the reveal are so insultingly contrived? The framing of Sheila is a distraction, a shiny object jingled in front of the audience to keep us from realizing that the core mystery is hollow. The old enemy with a new face is a cheat. It deprives the audience of the ability to guess, to engage, and to analyze, because the rules of reality have been suspended. If anyone can be anyone else through the magic of off-screen plastic surgery, then identity has no meaning, and actions have no consequences. This is why I am so relentlessly critical. I critique this show with such ferocity because I remember when it possessed a shred of psychological realism. I remember when characters made decisions based on recognizable human emotions, rather than the arbitrary whims of a writer's room desperate for a Friday cliffhanger. The devolution into pure, insulting laziness is not just disappointing, it is a violation of the unspoken contract between the creator and the viewer. We tune in expecting a story, and we are handed a randomized assortment of recycled tropes and character assassinations. Brooke Logan is an emotional abuser. The writers are creatively bankrupt. The second Luna Nozawa is a laughable concept, and the audience deserves better than this relentless parade of mediocrity. We must stop giving them a pass. We must demand accountability, coherence, and respect for the characters' histories. Until then, I will continue to bear witness to the wreckage, documenting every indefensible choice, every repugnant manipulation, and every cowardly narrative pivot. The truth is undeniable, and I will not stop speaking it